Namaskar and welcome to Sansad Television. I am Vishal Dahiya and you're watching our show Perspective, where we bring you detailed analysis of key national and international issues as well. Today we're going to talk about union budget and a specific part of the budget that is the budget allocated for Indian Railways. Now, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has allocated a capital outlay of 2.40 lakh crore rupees for the Indian Railways in the Union Budget 2023-24. This highest ever outlay is about 9 times the outlay made in financial year 2013-14. And this record budgetary push is aimed at accelerating projects like introduction of hydrogen-powered wagons and trains, laying of additional tracks, electrification of the network, and revamping stations with better amenities for passengers. Now, the maximum increase in allocation this year has been made for passenger amenities, which include redevelopment of stations with 13,350 crores earmarked for this purpose. At 37,581 crore rupees, the second highest increase in allocation has been proposed for railways rolling stock, which involves trains and wagons as well. Now, 30,749 crore rupees have also been allocated for doubling of railway lines. And all of us know that railways is one of the key drivers of the PM GatiShakti scheme and the national logistics policy as well. So today we'll try and understand as to how this allocation is going to work throughout the year in these specific segments. When we're talking about Indian Railways, how will it be implemented on the ground, what kind of impact it has, and in terms of private sector investment, how much of it we'll be able to draw in and in which specific areas. And for more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of experts. Let me first introduce them to you, beginning with Mr. Sudhendu Jyoti Sinha. He's here with me in the studio, advisor, transport and infrastructure connectivity with Niti Aayog. Welcome, Mr. Sinha. We have Mr. Sachin Bhanusali also joining us, chairman of CII's National Committee on Railways, joining us. And Mr. A.K. Bhattacharya, editorial director of Business Standard, is also with us. Welcome to you as well, Mr. Bhattacharya, and Mr. Bhanusali as well. I'll start with you, Mr. Sinha. Let's first start by, understanding these numbers which I mentioned, and I can see a lot of papers before you as well, looking at the BERE figures and of course the allocation this year. Now, when we look at the overall allocation, 2.40 lakh crore is of course significantly higher than what it was 10 years ago, much higher than what it was allocated last year in the budget as well. But what are the key specific areas? 2-3 allocations I mentioned. But apart from that, where is all this money going?
So the very fact that you showed that, you explained that it has been one of the highest ever allocation. And it is 9 times, 9x than what was allocated in 2013-14, almost 1 lakh crore extra what was allocated last year. So, the clear understanding that comes out of this particular allocation are 2 things. Number one, that the system of railways, the railway as a mode of transport, its significance has been so clearly understood, so clearly appreciated. And that is the reason why so much of allocation is there, A. And B, that there is confidence on the railwaymen and the railway systems that they will be able to use this primarily for the capital expenditure and they will take this thing forward. So these are the 2 understanding that straight away comes with such a massive allocation which has never been heard so far. So as I said in one of the earlier interactions, that now there cannot be a complaint for non-availability of funds. So fund is now available. Now how it is to be taken forward, and even if you see the way it has been planned to be spent out, that is primarily for the capital expenditure. So that is where the focus has to be. Okay. More and more assets to be added so that we are able to serve, expand more and more people as well as the freight customers. So that is what the focus of this particular intervention and this particular allocation is.
Okay,
yes.
Okay. We'll come to specific segments in terms of passenger amenities and freight as well, electrification and other parts. But let me first bring in Mr. Bhanusali here as well. Mr. Bhanusali, the government has made its intent clear. Here is the money on the table. Now, this is what the idea is. This is where it will be spent. What does the industry think of it?
Okay, Vishalji, I think the intent of the government in terms of development of Indian Railway as the primary engine of logistics of India is very clear. If we go a little backwards and if we look at National Rail Plan, which was rolled out, before that we had dedicated freight corridor coming up, followed by National Logistics Policy. In between these two, we also had the GatiShakti multimodal terminal policy, which was unveiled by Ministry of Railways as a part of the overall GatiShakti initiative. If you look at all this, the pathway towards making Indian Railways from a freight as well as passenger point of view becoming a primary source of momentum is very clear. From a let's say the industry perspective, industry has always been looking forward to railways playing an extremely important role in the entire process of development as well as logistics in particular. Two questions which come to mind when we look at the industry leaders is concerned, I think are one is that execution capability.
Okay.
Spending 240,000 crore rupees, 240,000 crore rupees, 240,000 crore rupees is not a joke in a matter of a year, and that on capital expenditure. Because for that you need a great deal of backward ability to procure, to execute and commission various projects which are concerned. So if you look at that, look at the sectoral allocation there, we have rolling stock which includes locomotives about 47,000 crore rupees in a hierarchy. Then new lines are coming up with 32,000, almost 32,000 crore rupees. Doubling also has been allocated almost 31,000 crore rupees. Track renewals, which are essentially in the nature of rejuvenating the existing tracks, are about 17,300 crore rupees. And electrification, which is a avowed policy in order to improve our energy independence, will get about 8,000 crore rupees. Apart from that, there are certain traffic facilities to be created at about 7,000 crore rupees. So the sectoral distribution or distributing it on multiple assets is very, very clear and I think clearly cut out.
Okay.
But the question still remains is that is the private industry which provides the supply chain for execution of these projects, which are normally done under EPC. So there is an engineering procurement which takes place and construction which takes place, is a matter of question. And particularly if you look at dedicated freight corridor, it has got delayed. Though it is in good shape now, we almost have about 75% of the dedicated freight corridor on the eastern and the western side already operational. But there is still a question about the gestation period which comes out of that.
Okay, but don't you think this is the right time for the industry to jump on this wagon of railway growth?
Absolutely. I think industry is looking forward to it. This is a great opportunity. And even from the point of view of bringing down the overall logistics cost, as and when Indian Railways start playing a greater role in the manufacturing industry's logistics requirement, and when Indian Railways offering becomes significantly better than that of road transportation, the overall logistics cost is going to come down.
Okay.
Of course, there would be need for the private sector to participate in actually running the train services on the network which is being developed, etc. But that's something which will follow. First, we need to get the execution of capital expenditure piece in place, and industry is looking forward to it.
Okay. I'll take that to Mr. Sinha a bit later as well. But first, let me bring in, Mr. A.K. Bhattacharya also. Mr. Bhattacharya is also joining us. Mr. Bhattacharya, as both the gentlemen here are pointing out, of course, this is the highest ever allocation for Indian Railways. And within the railways sector, sub-sector-wise, the allocation which has been made for various heads also point out to a well-planned strategy, as Mr. Bhanushali was referring to. How would you look at, because you would have been, taking a closer look at budget allocation for railways for years altogether now. What is different this time?
Well, there are quite a few things that are different this time. And I will just point to four areas. And before that, I will just give you a brief point that from a point of view of the central government, this is a major initiative. When the central government decides to increase its capital expenditure on railways from 1.6 lakh crore to 2.4 lakh crore in 1 year, which is a 51% increase, I think it's a vote of confidence in the Indian Railways. And also, as you clearly outlined, the various projects of doubling of lines, gauge conversion, construction of new lines, these are all ambitious tasks. So therefore, it is a vote of confidence from the union government by increasing the capital outlay for railways by way of budgetary support by 51%. So that's point number one.
Okay.
But this actually highlights some of the challenge areas for the Indian Railways, because the challenge areas are actually, the ball is in the court of the Indian Railways. Number one is that the operating ratio of the Indian Railways, which is actually, which indicates that the amount that the railways need to spend to earn every 100 rupees. Now that is unfortunately going up. It was very bad. It was 107. Now it was supposed to have come down to 98, but next year it is going to go up to 98.45, which means the railway's ability to earn from its investments to meet its requirements is actually not getting better. It may actually get slightly worse. So that's challenge number one. Challenge number two is this: while the government is spending more money on railways, I do find a little puzzling that why the Indian Railways will not raise its own resources. It raised around 82,000 crore of rupees on its own the current year, but it is only going to raise 17,000 crore next year. Now, this is a bigger challenge for the railways. Railways must be able, and this is a large organization, it's a capable organization, it must be able to raise more resources. And the final point I would like to make is that when the expenditure, that the capex goes up by 51% from the government account, so railways will also have to chip in with higher, what I would say, the bang for the buck.
Okay.
And that bang for the buck will depend on how railways manage its overall burden. Remember that 1/3 of the railways expenditure is going out because of the wages and pensions. Now that is something that the railways will have to manage. So all the things, how to use capex, how to raise more extra budgetary resources on your own, and how do you make sure the operating ratio gets better, and how do you contain the increasing burden of wages and pensions. Now it has gone up to the 34% of the total spending.
Okay.
Now, no organization can afford to have 1/3 of your money to go in only for the upkeep of your manpower. So these are the three challenges that the railways face. To sum up, the government of India has done exceedingly well by providing a 51% increase in the government's budgetary support to the railways. But now the ball is in the court of the Indian Railways to respond to this major contribution that the government of India has made to the Indian Railways by improving its performance, improving its operating ratio, which it is not improving going by the budget, and of course, making sure that the burden of wages and pensions are contained by growing faster.
Okay. Now, those are the points I'd like to take to you, Mr. Sinha. As Mr. Bhattacharya is pointing out, the ball is now in the court of Indian Railways, and in various aspects. Mr. Panushali also referred to one aspect. So I would want you to respond to all these one by one. First is what Mr. Bhattacharya was referring to in terms of improving the OR, the operating ratio, because ultimately that would mean how effectively the railway is utilizing its own resources as well and trying to earn money on them. That's one part. The other is when we're looking at the new projects or the money allocated for various subsectors within the Indian Railways, money to be spent on electrification, money to be spent on new wagons or maybe redevelopment of stations as well. The execution capability, as Mr. Bhanushali was pointing out, where do we stand and what needs to be done?
Like, the first thing first that you have mentioned about that the operating expenditure that is going, I must appreciate that it has been brought down. It was going beyond 100, but now it is well within, say, it is close to 98, and that will substantially improve with the kind of allocation and the kind of commitment that railways are showing. I must appreciate railways because over these years, what I have found is, I am watching is that the project delivery, there is a substantial improvement in the project delivery systems as such. By that is meant that, of course, that the time and the cost overruns are gradually coming down. That is something that should be sung for. Now, what is needed is with this kind of allocation, it has been so clearly laid out that, okay, these are the sectors where you are supposed to be spending money, primarily, of course, the capital expenditure ones. What railways will have to probably, if it could be, it would be expected that they kind of prioritize the projects. They try to identify that which are the ones where the throw forward, that is the requirement for money, is the least, so that could be delivered at the earliest time. So those are the projects, the right kind of priority has to be identified. Plus, of course, if the capital is there, then where exactly it will lead to debottlenecking of the congested routes, it will lead to the network, strengthening of the network, it will lead to the increase in the throughput, that is increasing the freight as well as the passenger mobility forward, so that the earning comes. So that is what so now the game is very clear. The game is with this much of allocation, the prioritization A, and the commitment to deliver on time. That is what is going to be the game changer.
Okay.
So my understanding is that with these two things, with these two focus, right before the railways, there's absolutely no going back. I think that the system will have a more trust. The railwaysmen will gain more trust for the next budget, where the allocation will further go up, because that is what, once they perform, that is going to kind of bring about a lot of credibility to them, and then the system kind of that reinforces them through a higher allocation. Yes.
Okay. Mr. Bhanushali, in terms of where should the private industry invest in subsectors when we're looking at railways? And the reason why I'm asking you this is that which might be the key focus areas for the private industry, or the areas of interest for the private sector, because there are new things which are being talked about. One is hydrogen fuel cell based trains, and this is a new technology, but then newer areas, newer arenas are where perhaps the private sector may find it more alluring.
Okay, so if we look at an international experience with respect to allocation of responsibility for taking up the role in development of railways as a logistics vehicle, almost everywhere, network is developed by the rail company. In India, we have a rail ministry. So network has to be developed, maintained and modernized over a period of time by the National Railway Board and the Railway Ministry. And running of services, particularly freight services, is primarily the responsibility of the private sector.
Okay.
In addition to that, when we come to project execution, even in Indian context, a large amount of project execution is done by private sector. We don't exactly follow the engineering, procurement and construction, the EPC route for it, because there are a lot of procurements which are done by Indian Railways and given as free supplies, whether it is construction of wagons or construction of railroads is concerned, the track is concerned. But over a period of time, there seems to be a shift towards EPC. So the role of private sector in development of railway projects is also going to grow. You must have seen that there used to be a time when there were hardly any companies in private sector which were in the space of execution of railway projects, and those were very small companies operating at subdivision, division level, at the most zonal railway level. Now we are national rail companies. We are companies like Larsen and Toubro having a separate rail construction division. In addition to that, I think there is also going to be an emphasis on privatization of freight services, the way it has been done by introducing, initially by introducing the container train operation by private operators. Then the special freight train operator scheme came in, automobile freight train operations came in, general purpose wagon investment scheme came in, wherein the rolling stock, particularly the freight rolling stock, the wagons are to be invested by the industry which is interested in taking that advantage. Then there are third-party logistics service providers or common carriers like the container transporters, who bring in their own rolling stock as well as containers in order to do transportation. So this is how the allocation takes place. But I think the core issue is going to be, unless we decongest the network to a very great extent, and unless we improve the transit time of freight traffic on the existing network by resorting to the dedicated freight corridor, all the four sides as well as diagonals, we will not be able to give quality service to the manufacturing sector, and until then the modal share is not going to grow.
Okay.
And once the modal share starts growing, what Mr. Bhattacharya mentioned, the operating ratio is going to improve. Currently, we are operating at barely about 35% of modal share as far as railways is concerned. As per the National Rail Plan, we are supposed to cross 50%. We are supposed to cross 40% very soon. So if this is actually going to happen, then not only the economics of operations of rails is going to improve in the hands of Indian Railway or the Railway Ministry, but it will also result into a better product being available for the manufacturing sector for small parcel size, long distance transportation by rail.
So there is three-way benefit.
Absolutely.
Okay. The railway ministry saves more money. The end user, gets to save both time and money, of course, because it's after all for business purposes that freight corridors are used mostly, and the private sector also, gets the opportunity to be a part of this growth story. Let me bring in Mr. Bhattacharya again here as well. Mr. Bhattacharya, as Mr. Bhanushali is referring to, and Mr. Sinha was also pointing out earlier, you, in your first response, said that the ball is in Railways court. Of course, it is there. The money has been allocated. The execution part has to be looked at. Decongestion of network should be done so that the services are made more efficient and more money can be saved. But what about the private sector cooperation? Mr. Bhanushali is referring to various areas. In your view, where should the private sector be coming in?
Well, I think there are many areas where the railways have already thrown open some sectors of development to the private sector. There are station development is one big area where the private sector is being invited. There was a plan, if I am not mistaken, to throw open some of the sectors for running private trains, and this will be able to address a major a challenge, in my view, the Indian Railways is facing. Right now, what happens is that the Indian Railways has an issue with cross-subsidization of tariffs, in a sense that the passenger tariffs are subsidized by the goods sector. Now, I think if you throw open some of the segments, particularly in the passenger segments, to private players, and allow and gradual calibrated entry of the private sector into running some of those services with a proper regulator in place, then I would imagine that the challenge of cross-subsidization of tariffs would also be addressed. So I genuinely believe that the ball is in the court of the Indian Railways, and with this kind of capital investment for the last 3 years running, I think the Indian Railways can face up to these challenges, but internal reforms will also be necessary, and they need to be expedited, like the cross-subsidization of tariff structure should be gradually be phased out, making sure that the management of the wage bills and the pension bill is kept under check, and of course using more of its financial clout. Indian Railways financial clout is not to be laughed at. Indian Railways is a major entity, a big player in the Indian enterprises sector, and it can raise resources on its own strength and can service them very well.
Okay.
So if it can augment those capital and resources with its own abilities, I would say that the Indian Railways will be able to face up to those challenges far more creditably than it has been doing so far.
Okay. Mr. Sinha, last question to you before we wrap this up, and that is about, of course, the private investment. Where and how much do you think Indian Railways can get in the private investment? That's one part. And which specific areas? Because as Mr. Bhanushali is referring to, there are certain areas where the private industry might be very keen on, and then some areas where there might be a bit of a different model which can be deployed.
So my understanding is, Vishal, that okay, risk appetite is already there. But the point is how you basically, the contract that you develop, the bits that you develop to grow, take it forward, how exactly you structure it. So that is where it lies to. So my understanding is that as far as, terminals are concerned, that could be one area, whether it is a freight terminal or it is a passenger terminal, that is one area where we could always think of getting the private capital. Rolling stock could be another area. Maybe running of the trains, yes, in certain areas it is being tried, and well, with both success and failure, it is a kind of mixed response out there. So these could be some areas where the assurance to get back the money, even if it is not a very big kind of advantage that the investor is getting. So if that surety is there, that is what is, and if risks are equally distributed, that is what I said.
Okay.
So maybe that terminal management, is one key area, because as you are aware that we have got odd number of terminals, 7,170 odd terminals are there, passenger, and similarly, a substantial number of freight terminals are there. How to manage them Can they be managed commercially? Can those terminals be kind of vehicles of bringing additional resources to the railways rather than a point for expenditure alone? That is what the game lies. So probably that sort of thinking has to be there. And what I'm watching is that some of a few of them where the redevelopment has taken place, they are the very, very successful models that has to be replicated all through. And well, let me tell you, our own Prime Minister has been emphasizing that these terminals, we should start focusing them as something beyond use for railways also. So maybe can we think of more kind of innovative utilization of those terminals so that it is able to, railways are able to get more of revenue and they become financially viable kind of terminals.
Multitasking there, you are finding different use there as well for the existing infrastructure facilities which are in place. Thank you so much, Mr. Sudhendu Jyotisena, Mr. Sachin Bhanusali as well, and Mr. A.K. Bhattacharya for sharing your views and insight as our experts were pointing out various nuances of the money allocated for Indian Railways in this year's budget, highest ever, 9 times more than what it was 10 years ago, almost 50% more than what it was last year, and a specific focus on various subsectors, trying to ensure that the engine of railway growth keeps chugging on. We'll keep a close watch on all the developments here in this sector and come back again to you with a different topic as well. Till then, keep watching Sansad.